Welcome to the Paneling Surfaces in Grasshopper webinar. As I was saying a second ago, surfaces are the main type of geometry used for creating smooth, rational shapes within the Rhino 3D modeling environment. Beginning with the presentation on the main principles of working with NURBS surfaces, this webinar will incrementally unpack a diverse set of surface-related techniques through a series of live exercises with Grasshopper. We actually have 3 instructors today, offering guided curriculum and continuous support, and it is our goal to provide you with an in-depth and personal learning experience. So some additional topics that we're going to cover are going to include: what is a surface? How do I make one, and what are its parts? If we have a surface, we can identify that it has its own space, so we can navigate that space. How might I be able to divide a surface into panels? And can I ensure that they are flat or keep them curvy, as another example? If we have a set of panels, we can test them for planarity and see what those numbers actually mean. And we can look at some different ways to visualize how those results actually might play out across the entire collection of panels. And lastly, if we have simple panels, how might we be able to create some more custom panel objects? All right, so to introduce the instructors, I'm Gil Akos, and here with me is Ronnie Parsons and Alvaro Soto. And we are Mode Collective, and we're a multidisciplinary design practice located in Brooklyn, New York. We have 3 set of initiatives, each understood under the monikers of Lateral, Design, and Lab. And in each case, these are different ways for us to actually connect with, engage, and work with other people, essentially bringing people together to look at design issues, how technology might augment our process, and how we can produce some really rich and interesting products as a result. So you've already been to Mode Lab, which is the kind of repository for one of those initiatives. And this is where we share learning content as well as host events for learning and community events as well. And as a part of that, you're taking a webinar right now, but we also have workshops here in our studio space where you can get a one-on-one intensive learning environment on a particular topic, such as this one was, here's some photos from the patterning lab, which was back in August. And in each case, we'll be investigating a particular topic and looking at how using contemporary technology, in this case the laser cutter and patterning techniques, to produce prototypes and explore this whole notion of patterning and screening. And of course, we also have a relatively new Facebook page where you can connect with us and connect with other attendees of this webinar, other workshops, etc. And this is really the place to get the most up-to-date information regarding our activities. We post here first whenever we're sharing learning content. So if you haven't already, connect with us on Facebook. Okay, so back to the topics for the webinar. A little bit of a few notes related to the infrastructure of the webinar. We are recording the webinar, and as we have on the last 2 webinars, the Introduction to Grasshopper and the Working with Data Trees webinar, we record them, we compile them into a sequence of more manageable videos, upload them to the web in HD, and share them with you so that you can review the content after the conclusion of the broadcast. So in addition to that, we'll also be sending you a follow-up email that includes a survey and any files that we may have generated together during the webinar, and a PDF of this presentation. So you should have already received an email with a link to the webinar source files. These are the exercise files we're going to go over. And they're for your reference. We'll be building them up from scratch, each one. But if you haven't already, if you haven't already downloaded them, be sure to look in the chat window for a link to the source files. And while you're there, verify that you have Grasshopper version 0.9.14 downloaded and installed. and there's also a link there for you if you need that. So the three of us will be conducting the webinar simultaneously. I'll be presenting, and Ronnie and Alvaro will be answering questions. So you should really feel that you should be able to ask questions at any point, regardless of what the question is. If it's a technical thing, where the objects are located that we're using, etc. Just go ahead and feel free to use that question window. We'll be addressing all questions, and when there are similar questions, we'll address them as a group together. And the idea here is that we really want to make this as much of an interactive and live experience for you on the other end of the webinar. Okay, so this is paneling surfaces with Grasshopper, and hopefully you have a little bit of experience with Grasshopper at this point, and maybe you were able to review the webinar that we shared with everyone online. But we're just going to recap very quickly what Grasshopper is, right? It's a node-based algorithm editor integrated with Rhino 3D's modeling tools. So that means that it's a plugin for Rhino, and as opposed to text, we're actually going to be making connections between objects to define logical relationships, and thereby creating a parametric model. Right? And the parametric model is just something that changes in a coordinated way when the inputs of that model change. All right, so if we're comfortable with that, we can dive into the webinar topics for this webinar, which, as I mentioned before, are going to fall under these kind of 6 categories, and these are going to correlate to the exercise files that we go over. So we're going to start with an introduction to surface geometry. We're then going to explore surfaces and look at the different properties we can extract from them. We can then divide a surface, gaining some panels from that surface to break it up into smaller parts. Once we've done that, we can actually evaluate those surfaces and access a little bit more about the properties of each one of those surfaces, and look at different ways that we might be able to display that in the viewport as feedback to actually understand in the collection of panels which ones may be more curvy or less curvy, etc. So then we're going to look more closely at how we might analyze and display surface data in the viewport, particularly using quad-based surfaces. And then lastly, we're going to wrap with defining custom panels. After we've already divided the surface, we can create our own custom panels at each one of those locations. So in terms of the actual kind of schedule of the webinar, these are the 6 categories we're going to go over. Each one will run about 15 minutes, and after each one we'll stop and address any questions that you might have. All right, so each time we'll go through the exercise, the PowerPoint, and then you'll be able to ask questions and we'll address them on the go.